Gentlemen, we're here tonight kind of talking through everything military and how it pertains to technicians. I'm going to start by just kind of telling a quick story as to why this topic in particular is important to me and where I've got so much to learn from our panelists tonight. My experience with managing military vets has been one, really, really good. I've had a lot of really good experiences with military vets that have worked on my teams before. But something that I was always kind of trying to get my finger on the pulse of was, how do we communicate with vets? How do we really, really manage them in a way that is effective to them, is not insulting to them, and is also just really kind of learning their train of thought in different things. I had a specific experience where I had a technician working for me that was a military vet, and I was struggling. And I was struggling because I felt like my management style was more of here you go, here's the expectation, good luck. And I wasn't giving this individual enough structure. And it took me a while to learn that piece of it. And as at the time, a young manager was really something that I struggled to get my hands around. And so I started picking the brains of some of the folks on this panel tonight, and it was just blown away by how much insight and knowledge they bring to the table. And that is something to me that is super impactful. I hope our audience that joins us tonight really takes home a lot of valuable insight in that regard in general, right? Because one, it's really, really hard to find text right now. We've got a great opportunity with military veterans to be able to build stronger shops, to be able to build stronger teams in general. And I think after you get done sitting through this roundtable tonight, you're going to see that. You're going to see all of the elements that go into managing military veterans and really just kind of trying to talk their language a little bit. So tonight I am extremely happy to introduce our panel, which I know Sarah and I talked about this before the panel tonight, is just an incredibly strong panel. I can't state that high enough. That the individuals we have joining us tonight are some of the most impressive people I've sat in a room with, a virtual room with, right? And so I'm going to let them introduce themselves, mostly because in our pre-call, before we actually did this, we got together and talked about our agenda for tonight. And I said I would embarrass myself trying to state their military titles. So I'm going to let them do that. But just want to welcome Duke, Charlie, TC, Marc, and Michael to the panel. It's a pleasure having you gentlemen here tonight, and just really, really excited about this one. So Marc, I'm going to start with you, if you don't mind. If you want to introduce yourself, where you work at, and in your military background.
My name is Marc Babcock. I am the service manager of Lithia Nissan of Eugene in Eugene, Oregon. Retired United States Marine with a background in H-1 helicopters, was a CDQAR and a quality assurance representative when I retired.
All right, Michael, you want to go ahead?
My name is Michael Olivias. I'm currently the lead technician at American Jewelry and Pawn. I was a 3521 motor team mechanic under Charlie Shephard here. I finished out my 4 years sitting at QC and basically doing all the maintenance I could on Humvees, 7 tons, and all that.
Yeah, and you've got a cool background as well, Michael, with some of the cars you've worked on, right? I mean, you've worked on some crazy stuff.
Yes, sir. 6 months after I got out, I actually landed a job at a Ferrari, Bentley, and Lotus dealer as a technician. So, yeah, I've had some interesting gigs.
They, from what I'm told, they still won't let me around a Ferrari, just in general. Like, they not even look at it. Just like, don't touch it, stay away. TC?
Yeah, Jay, I'm in the same boat. I'm not allowed to fancy cars like that. TC Olsen. I'm the Director of Talent Acquisition for LKQ Corporation. I'm a 10-year 11 Bravo. Some of the folks on the call know what that is. It's infantry. I'm a ground pounder. But you're happy to be a part of the panel. I think the Michael Charlie relationship is pretty cool to even have one of your soldiers with you. So, but nice to meet everybody.
Charlie.
Hello, everyone. My name is Charlie Shephard. My current role, I'm a senior business analyst for Rutterkey Solutions, and I spent 21 years in the Marine Corps. Ended my career as a maintenance officer. So I had an opportunity to work with a lot of different equipment, a lot of different, pretty much everything ground. I managed the folks that work for that. So that's kind of my background.
And last but not least, Duke.
Hey, hello everybody. My name's Duke Fancher. I'm currently working at Tag Truck Center and Lonestar Truck Group. We are a Freightliner dealership headquartered out of Memphis, Tennessee. I was in the Army for 3 years and did some junior ROTC time before that with the Navy. So 63 Whiskey Hotel 8, I was a all-wheel vehicle mechanic and a wrecker operator. So glad to be here as part of the panel, and looking forward to maybe offering some insight from past experience. So thanks for having me.
Just based on all of your experiences, I am definitely the weakest link here, right? So I want to talk first and foremost and kind of set out the agenda of what we're going to talk about tonight. Really kind of the key points that we want you to take away from this tonight, and hopefully try to lay out some understanding of what we're trying to do here. So first and foremost, if you have questions, a lot of times in these roundtables, the chat area can get really, really busy. We love attendees to be talking in the chat, and it's just a blast to follow that along. If you do have a question you want us to answer on the air, feel free to enter that into the Q&A section down below. It's really, really easy to do, and we'll take some time as we get into the presentation to really dive into those. So we welcome your questions, we welcome your comments, and the participation of the listeners is always fun to watch, and just a lot of great insight. As far as the agenda, tonight we're going to talk about why shops should be proactively recruiting veterans, maybe overcoming some of the stereotypes that come ahead of hiring a veteran, and why that's impactful and why it's important to have a good understanding of that. We're going to talk about managing veterans, right? And tips for managing veterans. And somebody like myself with more of a civilian background, making sure that we have an understanding of how to communicate and really how to interact with a veteran and kind of see what they have. And then we'll hold some questions at the end, right? So depending on time, I know the last one went a little past our time, but we do feel like it's important to interact with the audience and be able to talk with them once we get to the end. So if you do have questions, again, put them in the Q&A. We will get to them and hopefully talk about them in detail. So let's get started with the recruiting veterans to work for your shop, and maybe where there's some opportunity there, where there might be some ideas of just in general, what are some great traits about a military veteran that can help your shop, add value to your shop. And I guess, Charlie, I'll start with you. When you're looking at recruiting veterans to work for you, work alongside you on your team, what is it that sticks out to you as reasons why you would want veterans on your team?
So a few reasons. So typically with veterans, one of the things that come along with that is being able to be flexible and agile. Those individuals have typically been put in situations where they have to adjust quickly, and as well as that, just the diversity of experience, right? So typically veterans have they've kind of worked the gambit, and they're understanding basic structure, they understand basic procedures, and they know what that means. But then they also understand when sometimes you have to kind of look outside of those standards and think outside of the box to be able to accomplish what you need to accomplish. And then typically they have that can-do attitude, right? They're always up for a challenge. And if you call them out, there's a really good chance that they're going to push even harder to make sure they accomplish what you want them to accomplish.
That's great. TC?
How do you follow Charlie? No, I think
I ask myself that all the time.
One of the things he alluded to is obviously the advanced learning curve. A lot of times veterans are asked, and while they're in the service, they're asked to do things with very little resources, find a solution for a problem. Obviously one of the traits that I think is extremely important today is, being able to adapt. As Charlie mentioned, there is the ability to, have that teamwork, have that leadership quality in that person, already instilled in that person before they ever become an employee. So that is something that you may not necessarily have to teach, depending on the service, and honestly, even some of the early enlisted types of folks, they learn what that is right away. They learn that from day one. So I think when you look at some of those competencies, it's extremely important to measure that when you're interviewing someone, or even when you're out seeking them. The other piece that I always talk about is adversity. There's adversity in every position that we have, not just as a civilian employer, but also adversity is experienced by every single service member in their daily life, day after day. So those are things that you're getting when you do bring someone like this into your family. So I think it's important to look at those traits. That's that may not be worded out on a resume, but as you read between the lines per se from their service, it's important to know that they're going to be able to take anything that you throw at them.
Yeah, I think that's an incredibly important trait, and one that, as you get kind of the kitchen sink thrown at you, especially in a shop, that can definitely be a key trait. Michael, you've got a little bit of a different insight into this, or maybe not different, but you are in a shop, right? And you're able to see, those coworkers and who's effective and maybe not, and maybe the opposite side of that, maybe who's not effective. But tell us a little bit about what you see if you're working alongside maybe a vet as compared to, and maybe not even the comparison, but really, what do you love about working next to a vet?
Well, I think the things I love the most are like the intangibles, showing up on time, the trust I can put in them, and the drive. I love seeing the guy next to me not just want to get the job done, but want to get more done, want to learn as much as he can because he wants to be as competent as possible. I've known a lot of techs who were, just good with being C-level techs, doing basically maintenance work and collecting their check, and that was it. But with every veteran I've ever worked with, it was always a drive to do more, to be able to be more competent with what they were doing.
Which I'm assuming you had some of those traits based on the fact that you're working on Bentleys and Ferraris within 6 months of coming out into the civilian world.
Shephard wouldn't have let me get away with anything less.
That's a sign of a good leader. Duke?
So, I think, and we kind of touched on our pre-call, is, the discipline that comes along with getting a job done. There's not a lot of quit in a military trained fella or gal, either or. They're going to get it done. And I think TC, you said it kind of nice. Hey, you're used to doing it with limited resources, and it kind of takes me back to the day of putting in Humvee engines out in the field with, we didn't have air tools, we didn't have generators, we didn't have any of those kind of things. You were out there with a set of general tools, and you didn't have a choice but to get the job done. So I like that, TC. But I think discipline is number one. And I think a lot of it goes into safety. You have to be careful when you're out in the field. You have to look out for each other. And it's kind of some unspoken rules that you're trained, they're instilled in you, and that value comes along, and that's not on a resume. You're just not going to find that skill set out of a guy or a gal that's coming in off the street. I mean, these folks have a high level of training, and that's another thing. Military vets aren't scared of doing training. It's instilled in a way of life that it's when I talk specifically about becoming a Freightliner or a dealer certified tech, there are hundreds of hours to become a master certified technician, and military vets are not scared of getting their training done, and they understand the discipline it takes to get the job done. So those are 3 traits that I think are kind of head and shoulders above the rest.
Marc, what about you up in the Northwest? I mean, is it, I'm guessing maybe some similar thoughts? Is there anything that you'd like to add there?
Having 2 technicians under myself, both military vets, it's the extra mile that you also get out of them. You can give them a simple task because maybe a vehicle overheating, and you know, they do the extra mile to find everything wrong with that cooling system. It isn't just, oh, it needs a water pump or it needs a thermostat. I mean, they literally go the extra mile, and they follow the service manuals to a T pretty much. I've actually had customers that I've had one of my Marine Corps technicians say they got their vehicle back better than factory. So I mean, that to me is just, you know, a praise for my shop and the extra mile they put forth to make sure it's better than when they got it.
Marc, how do you, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, maybe I'll table this until then, but one thing that I'll have you guys chew on while we go through the next section is if you're in a flat rate environment, how that works, right? Where they want to go the extra mile, and at times you're restricted by times that you have allocated to you to be able to use for those repairs. So I'll bring that back. I'm actually going to write that down. Because I think that's a key point to just talk about and understand when we talk about managing technicians. One thing that I wanted to bring up with that, I guess a couple of you had mentioned this, is resumes. And I noticed for myself as a civilian, even when we started Find a Wrench and went in with WrenchWay here, that when a veteran would put their military experience on the piece of paper, on the resume, right? And I'm really good at not judging by a resume. I like to talk to everybody regardless. But at times it was almost hard for me to comprehend what was on the resume, right? And the resumes were always perfect. Everything was, I mean, I's dotted, T's crossed, and everything, and just really, really well done. The one thing that I struggled with as a civilian was looking at a resume and saying, okay, how does this experience translate over to the civilian world, right? And I'm curious, and I'll open this up to whoever wants to take it, but to me, that was something where I, as a civilian with no military background, was something that I struggled with. Does anybody have any advice on how to maybe read or translate military experience over to the kind of the civilian world?
Yeah, I mean, there are tools out there that help with it. I know a lot of government sites have, you know, kind of a skills assessment type of functionality to it. I think the best way is really, you know, kind of tagging in those other veterans in your organization to say, hey, you know, this person, you know, for instance, myself, I'm an 11 Bravo. Nothing about that has anything to do with recruiting, right? But there's certain competencies that carry over that make that type of person, you know, a good fit for those roles. A lot of companies are really trying to develop a way to cross-functionally identify traits within someone's resume based on whatever their MOS is, whatever their specialty, their occupational specialty is. But I think the best way is tagging in somebody like a Marc, like a Charlie, like a Duke to say, hey, you know, this guy might have been in transportation, but he knows how to fix things. This guy might have been in this particular role, but we know he can work under pressure, and he can do that not just without folding, but also do that confidently. I think that's hands down the best method to it. And many companies have a military affairs program or some sort of outlet. But the best way to me is that networking piece within your own organization to truly understand what, you know, a person is bringing to the table based on their resume. I'll be honest, I don't really read much into resumes. I've got to talk to you. I want to hear it. Typically, the vets, you can probably tell if they're a veteran, whether or not that they've said it or whether or not they've got it on their resume, just by certain terms, just by the way we kind of respond to each other. Heard somebody say tracking the other day, and I was like, which unit? You know, so you know those are ways that I think are probably the most effective. But there are tools out there, and you know, the civilian side is really trying to get a little bit more efficient on providing what that looks like.
Charlie, I know you and I had talked when we did our podcast, and maybe it was some other conversation, I can't recall, but you had talked about almost either developing or trying to identify tools to almost be a translator for this means this, right? Or like just if you break it down to a dummy like me to be able to understand. Talk to me about the importance of even understanding that background. And I think TC hit on some great stuff right there, because I think just being able to, you know, this actually translates to this and is a really, really good quality. Maybe talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so TC makes some great points, and I've kind of gone into the military translator as well, and they're vague. They're a good starting point, I would say. So our conversation, so the idea I came up with trying to build that translator actually started when I worked for the city of Houston. So typically what I would do is I would tell my HR, any veteran resume that came to us, send them to me. So there were nights when I would look at 50, 60 resumes, and I was looking for those, like TC kind of alluded to, I wasn't looking just for that, what their MOS was. I was also looking at where are they stationed? You know, what units were they with? You know, and I know enough about most units and most branches that I can say, okay, he or she has some exposure to this type environment and this type of experience. So I want to talk to them and pull out a little bit more. So I think that's the key. And I do have that notebook still, Jay. It's getting thicker. I just have to figure out how to put it on.
I'll need you to translate that for me.
Yeah, I need to figure out how to put it into some usable information that I can share. So I think that's the big piece, though. And TC said it. Reach out to veterans, and then as veterans, I think it's important for us to stay up to date, right? On kind of what's going on. You kind of reach back. I'm lucky enough. I still know a lot of folks on active duty, and I know a lot of folks that are still engaged in one way or another. The nice thing about, for me, as a maintenance officer in the Marine Corps, for motor team maintenance, when I retired, there was 103 of us. So it's a very small group. So most of us knew each other, and we continue to reach back and kind of know the new folks that are coming on board. So we kind of have that capability to kind of reach back and go, hey, what are you guys teaching in school now? And then that helps me understand, okay, so that young kid coming out of MOS school is learning this or that. So if I see, you know, he attended this type training, okay, I know what that means. And I can engage and point them in the right direction. So I think that's a big piece. So for veterans, kind of reaching back, making sure we still understand the changes within the military, and then passing that information on. So that's a big piece of it.
Michael, I'm curious to know if you've ever put an application in or sent your resume in somewhere, included your military background, and then we're looking at the person across the desk from you and saying, I don't know if this guy or this guy or girl really understands what what my experience is.
I'm actually pretty grateful of the SEPs and TAPS class that I got. Did a pretty good job of helping us with our resume building. And a big part of that was just eliminating acronyms. So many of us want to use acronyms all the time because that's what we're so used to. But the odds of some random person knowing what an MRAP is are pretty low. So you just exchange that to large truck or equipment, and it kind of helps you out. And it also helps out that the last time I even had to actually submit a resume where I wasn't headhunted for it, the manager was a former Marine, so it hooked up.
Yeah, then you don't have to translate anything. Marc, do you feel like when you get the resume of somebody that's been in the military, you might have a leg up on the competition because you can actually translate what they're saying?
Yeah, it is easier when you do get that resume of a military veteran. Just looking at it, as Charlie was saying, is you kind of basically know where that person has been, what they've done, what they've kind of been through, especially, you know, the network that we kind of keep in touch with of active duty, and even, you know, other military veterans like LinkedIn and stuff like that. There's this funny cartoon. I'm pretty sure you've all seen it. It has a manager sitting behind a desk and a squared away gentleman standing on the other side of him. And the manager's looking at a resume and it said killed bad guys. And the manager's like, "This is your first resume, isn't it, Mr. So-and-so?" And I think that's a lot of changed as Michael has said, the TAP and TAMP classes that we now get, with the extreme amount of emphasis they put into resume writing and getting rid of our acronyms and just making us more basically promotable to the civilian populace is something that they are investing a lot in when we do get out of the military nowadays.
Do you do any, you guys run one of the best run truck dealerships, and really any dealership that I've seen. I got to witness it firsthand a couple of weeks ago in Memphis, and just a really, really awesome place. When you've got a manager that might not have the military background that you do you do any type of coaching, or are there opportunities to sit down with them and say, "Hey, you know what? We're looking at this resume and here's what it says"?
So, you know, specifically, Jay, I would say probably not enough, in my opinion. And I will take that back and do more. I can promise you that. But one of the things that I've done, and this applies not only to military, but in any shop environment, in my experience, I like to bring in other guys, whether it's a lead technician or a shop foreman, and you kind of get that instant buy-in. So, you know, if I'm interviewing you, Jay, and I say, well, you know, I think this guy can turn a wrench, and you've admittedly said that's not your forte. But, you know, if I said, hey, I want to hire Jay and bring him on, right? I like Jay, he's a cool guy. Well, you get out to the shop and, you know, it's your first day on the job and you're not sure where the bathroom is, right? And our guys are looking at you going, I don't know if this guy's going to fit or he's not going to fit. But you take that same scenario and I bring in, you know, a Brian Earl or my shop manager and then a lead tech, particularly if you have a specific job specialty. So like if you're used to building transmissions or engines, maybe I bring in one of my engine guys, and if I see that you're military, I would bring in one of my guys that's prior service and let them be part of that interview process. And then when you start on the floor or in the office or wherever that is, you've already got a mentor, an unnamed mentor, but you have a friend, so to speak, who's there to kind of help you see your way through. And that aids, you know, that onboarding process helps to aid in retention long-term. And I think that's applicable in any of our businesses. But I do think that that's a valid point to be taken away for employers. If you have a military person come in, and Charlie, you alluded to it as well, you know, you kind of need a little bit of a translator to say, how does this relate to our business and how can we capitalize on that experience?
Yeah, I think that's a great approach, right? To be able to have somebody that speaks that language and honestly makes that new employee a little bit more comfortable in the setting that they're coming into. It's always an awkward place to walk into a new job and trying, like you said, even trying to find the restrooms or, you know, where to eat lunch at, or, you know, that kind of stuff. So having that tour guide essentially to help you out can eliminate a lot of that awkwardness. Now, one other thing that you mentioned, Marc, was your TAP program, the Transition Assistance Program. And that was one of the things that I was, you know, I knew about as far as a civilian and reviewing resumes, but talk to me a little bit about what TAP is and what a transition assistance program does for a vet when they're coming out.
So mine was about a week long. I did it in Okinawa, Japan, of all places. It just the extensive resume writing. They teach you two kind of resumes. From what I remember, is you do have a military government type of resume, which many pages long. I'm pretty sure mine's 9 or 10 pages long. The civilian employee doesn't, or the civilian managers really don't want to see that. They make us show us actually how to get that down to 1 or 2 pages with a cover letter, and, you know, change your acronyms, like to, you know, what it means to be like Michael was saying, like, hey, I might be a quality assurance representative on, you know, H-1 aircraft. Well, the equivalence into a shop is maybe already a B-level tech with doing as much wrench turning as we do on both the air and ground side in the Marine Corps. And they teach you how to dress. They teach you, you know, what to wear, and don't be surprised if you're getting a brand new, right out of the military, 4 years, gentleman or female that you're interviewing, and they're in there for a technician position in a full suit. That's just the type of stuff they teach, because it's just pure professionalism, and they want you to promote yourself in the best way you can.
So you're there for a week, and I know I'm kind of going a long way into history here in some cases, but when you're there for a week and you're working on your resume, are they working with you on other things as well, on top of just the resume and getting it from the 9 or 10 pages down to the 1 or 2 pages? What else are they working on with you?
We did many different interviews for many different types of positions that we were interested in. And they will actually bring in other, you know, instructors or many senior military members to actually interview you, cold interviews, or, you know, prep you. It just kind of gets you prepped for the outside world. I remember interviewing at SpaceX before I joined Lithia, and that was just, you know, that was my first interview out of the Marine Corps, and it was, you know, kind of I want to say uneasy, because I wasn't used to the civilian populace, and here I am sitting at SpaceX trying to build rocket motors. But yeah, they just prep you in many different ways when it comes to both your resume and how to dress and how to sit, and your facial mannerisms, fresh haircuts, still clean shaves, obviously, you know, out of the way now. But yeah, TAP, no matter where you do your TAP class, when it comes to at least the Marine Corps, it's pretty cut and dry from base to base. It's pretty cookie cutter, I should say. They want to make sure everybody's getting the same information.
That's good to know. In our meeting prior to this roundtable, and I can't remember which one of you said this, but one thing that really stuck out to me was that it was no longer about blending in like it was in the military, right? When you get your resume out there, it was no longer about kind of really trying to not stand out, but you really are trying to stick out. You're trying to get somebody to hire you. And to me, that was so powerful to hear that, because it kind of put you in an awkward position, right? Where you're not trained that way. You're not trained to stand out from the crowd. And TC, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but I thought that was fascinating when you guys were talking about that, and just something to me that I never even would have thought about.
Yeah, it's actually I presented to a veteran program at one of the universities in Tennessee, and that was the title. It was, how do you stick out when you're taught to blend in? One of those tactics, and this is something that I know we all do a great job of, is, and Marc even alluded to this earlier, is staying close to that network that you have. I know the TAP offices teach you how to get a LinkedIn set up, how to get your social media set up. It's also important for them to show you how to clean up your social media. What's out there is discoverable, and I look. I'm an employer trying to hire as many veterans as possible. I'm looking. There could be some potential flags there, but really the best way for me, I think, at least in my opinion, to not land in the abyss of an applicant pool that many applicants land in on a daily basis, is to use the networks that you have. We all have our network, whether that's Marc has his Oki network, or Charlie has his network of the 100 that he fell into that pool of. But those networks are the best way to be discoverable. I always go back to this one example, and that's the West Point network. Those folks, they come out of the service and they have a job, and a lot of that is because the people that are hiring that have come from that same program know what they're getting with that person. So networking to me is the most effective way, not just to find someone, or not just to find a position, but even, I know there's a couple questions in the chat. How do I find veterans? Well, they're there. They're probably right next to you. You just don't know how to integrate into that network yet. But there's a lot of great programs out there to teach that. But yeah, I think that's important. That's a strong message. Sticking out now. We're taught to keep our head low. Now it's about you kind of standing up and showing who you are. Whether that is showing up in a full suit, and sometimes you get that employer that looks at you and they're like, wow, you look very well dressed, but this is for a technician role, right? This is for you're going to be turning wrenches here. But I think Marc talked about this, professionalism. To me, that's what's symbolic of that suit.
That's some powerful stuff there. That is some really, really good stuff. And I think, again, that's something that I've learned in my conversations with all of you is knowing that, right? Like I've had that experience with a technician coming in to a shop that I was managing, and not quite understanding why they were dressed to the T's, right? Like everything was buttoned up, they looked good. And it was, it took me a while to learn that, but it was something that, as it happened multiple times, I was like, this is a really, really cool thing. This is something where maybe they don't even think they're standing out, but they are. And to me, that was in a really, really good way. I think the world of that. As we kind of go through this process and we talk about hiring veterans and why there's a lot of reasons why you want to hire veterans, one of the things I want to talk about are the stereotypes of hiring a veteran, right? And I've heard this from shops, and it was something that was concerning to me, in that I've had people to me say before that they won't hire a veteran, and it just blew my mind that somebody could think that way. Like, I just, it didn't click with me as to why that was. And, you know, it's something I still kind of struggle with in terms of just hearing it, right? Like, why would you not want to hire a veteran? And so there are some stereotypes out there that we need to overcome with a military background, right? And I don't know, you know, TC, I know, and not to go right back to you, but you had a great comment last night about something with to the level of like PTSD or something that maybe the general public is a little afraid of, and it might be more because it's unknown than anything, correct?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's just a lack of understanding.
Right.
You know, obviously not necessarily having that experience as that person hiring or as that employer. There's a lot of stereotypes out there, right? Undereducated, lack of experience. You know, I think I saw a couple questions come through. If they're a veteran, what is their automotive knowledge? You know, those types of things that I think you'll never truly understand until you talk to them, until you measure, you know, what you're trying to accomplish with that meeting. You know, I think I threw out a percentage last night. It's about 14% of the actual combat arms types of services that really the general public sees, right? They see the tactical side of it. But there's a lot of Marcs, there's a lot of Michaels out there that really are the reason, you know, those tactical pieces even exist. Now, if there's any other infantry guys on here, I'm gonna get probably booed off the stage, but I truly believe it's definitely a team fight. So that's, to me, that's what's important, is to kind of understand, you know, what you're getting. I think I heard somebody else last night talk about, you know, the fear of not being able to communicate. That's what we're taught. We're taught to communicate. We're taught, and whether that is authoritatively or if that's in another way. But I think those stereotypes are ones that do cloud somebody who doesn't necessarily have that experience or exposure to somebody in the military. But we're all people too, you know.
And Michael, I believe it was you, right? Talking a little bit about the communication side and maybe the stereotypes that aren't accurate in a lot of cases for communicating with veterans or veterans in a shop. And you had mentioned the communication stereotypes, and that was something that stuck out to me in talking with you, that, you know, that was something that maybe you were, maybe not so much you directly, but you've kind of heard that stereotype, correct?
Yeah, most definitely. Like TC kind of alluded to, most people, I would say their general perspective or their only real experience with, especially Marine veteran, is the drill instructor from Full Metal Jacket, you know, and that's what they're kind of expecting. But as you said earlier, like with my job at the Ferrari dealer, I was going to be a lot more customer facing than most technicians are. I'm going to be asking them to spend $10,000, $20,000 to fix little things with their car. So I'm going to have to be able to communicate that properly. And that was a big question that my manager at that shop had, was, would I be able to do that effectively and politely and not have any issues with customers who have millions and millions of dollars, who are used to being kind of served, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Charlie, I think you had some great insight into this as well, in terms of some of the stereotypes of veterans, and what have you seen out there?
Yeah, so I think Steve in the chat said something about one of the things he's challenged with is setting the bar too high. So I'll kind of caveat on that and kind of tie it in to, you know, sometimes too that stereotype's out there, right? And that veteran's coming in to try to take my job, or they're gonna work too hard and make us look bad, right? So those are some big ones for sure that I've seen where, you know, and I think I said last night, you know, one of the organizations I worked at, you know, kind of getting to understand how the operations work so I could manage better. And, you know, I was told that I was working too hard. I need to slow down, right? So really, truly understanding how you can fit that. And so sometimes that's a good thing, right? Sometimes you need to bring that veteran in to get those other folks to step up their game, or unfortunately, if it comes to that, to step out and allow someone else to come in there and fill that role, right? And just from a team perspective, regardless veteran or not, if you got the right team, you can do more with less, right? One of the things I enjoyed the most about being in the Marine Corps, and whenever, so we call it a slate in the Marine Corps. Basically, how many people am I supposed to have? How many do I actually have? I always wanted that number very low, right? Because typically what's going to happen is the Michaels of the world are going to say, oh, you need somebody to fill that spot? I'll do it, right? And I give them the tools to do it, and they're going to step up and do it, right? So we accomplish more that way, and that's kind of the Marine Corps way anyways. We've always kind of done that. It's in our history. But I think that's a big part of that, right? So understanding how those veterans are going to fit in and overcoming those stereotypes, and maybe even using them to your advantage, right?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity for vets to be able to do that. And hopefully as we educate the general public on the strengths of military veterans, I think maybe that becomes more accepted, right? And I think that's a really big deal. Duke, anything to add there in terms of maybe some stereotypes that you've seen of vets, or you've got a lot of experience in the industry. I'd be curious to hear what you've seen or heard, or just kind of maybe even personally had to deal with in that regard.
I would say the first thing, there are a lot of pro-veteran companies, and I got out in '95, and I remember it was a TAP program. I think we called it something different, but Schneider they were a big proponent of hiring military, and when you went into those transition classrooms to work on resume writing and interview building, their advertisements and pamphlets were everywhere. So there are a lot of pro-vet companies out there, and I think for me, I left Fort Knox, arrived in Houston, Texas on a Thursday night, and Friday morning Schneider was calling me, and ultimately I went to work there the following Monday. So I think as well with the stereotypes, I think that when you can look to those companies that are pro-vet, especially coming right out of the gate, so to speak, I think there's some value there. They understand a little bit more of who you are, and the need to try to build programs around that retention piece, such as the mentors and things like that. But the stereotyping is tough. The one other piece of advice, and I was thinking about this last night, I'm an outgoing kind of guy. I'm not an introvert guy. I was probably meant to be in sales, but liked fixing trucks more. And so my personality, I think, was maybe modified slightly in the military, but it didn't change my DNA, who I was. And I think for companies that, if you're looking for techs or service advisors or parts department people or salespeople, I think there are a lot of tools, disc profile assessments and things like that companies can use to really kind of identify who you are at your core. Whether you're a high D, or whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, or whether you're detail oriented or more of a kind of just a let it all go kind of person. So I would advise, if you're struggling hiring a vet and you're really not sure what you're going to get, there's more tools out there than just sitting down and having a conversation. So
yeah, I 100% agree with everything that you're saying, and it's nice to get this insight in general from all of you. I mean, this is just incredible stuff. Before we get to our next section on managing veterans, we do have a few questions that I want to pose to the group here. First being, to identify potential candidates, what resources are available for employers to gain access to and make contact with veterans who might want opportunities in our businesses. Anybody have a good tip on places to share opportunities to vets?
You can actually go from base to base if you look up base tap and tamp. It doesn't matter which, obviously, military it is, but you can look up the tap and tamp offices for the bases and reach out to them, and they will post jobs for you.
That's good.
Yeah, that's something else I was going to say. There's a lot of organizations out there that, will connect you with veterans. Sometimes as an employer, some of those partnerships cost a lot of money. One thing that I have found, and I've sought many of them. Recruit Military is a good one. Does cost a little bit of money. The Work for Warriors is one that I've recently come across, and it's spread out throughout the U.S. It's not branch specific, but it's really connecting those active job seekers that are veterans, those veterans that are actively out on the market, to employers. Doesn't cost anything. I think to me that's one of the best pieces. It ties in. There's local pockets of it. I got connected in Southern California, ended up in Georgia, and really just connected all across the U.S. from there. But there's a lot of different companies out there that'll help you connect as an employer, connect with veterans who are actively seeking. The TAP offices are great to plug into as well.
Yeah, that's great insight. And I think that actually, most of the questions that we had out there were really focused on that, is how do we get our name out in front of military veterans? And I think that's cool because it shows initiative from businesses wanting to get in front of vets, right? And being able to look for those opportunities, because I think there's, as you do research and as you kind of are trying to draw people to your business, that's a pretty great thing. I did see a comment in here in the comment section that I really liked. And honestly, I have to give a shout out to everybody putting comments out there. It's actually hard to keep up with them. And I think it's really, really cool just to see all of the backgrounds and see all of, I will say you all are throwing a lot of acronyms at me that I'm not sure that I'm going to get my hands around tonight. Even as I talk to all of you, I might have to hold Charlie after to be able to translate some of this for me. But I mean, I'm missing the comment that I was looking for today. But it was really good. I mean, just going through, there's so many comments, and being able to read through them and see that connections are already being made through the chat. Pretty fascinating stuff. So let's talk about managing veterans, right? And this is when I talked about this to lead off the roundtable. I had personal experience in this in terms of something I struggled with, right? And trying to make sure that I was talking to a vet the way that they wanted to be talked to, communicating with them the right ways, and really trying to honestly make sure I wasn't insulting them, or make sure that I wasn't treating them differently than they expected to be treated. So the very first thing that comes to mind for me that we talked about in our pre-meeting was the thank you for your service thing, right? And it was kind of a funny elephant in the room type of thing. And somebody brought it up in our conversation about, getting greeted for, thank you for your service, and that putting that individual in kind of an awkward position, because you're like, okay, you're welcome. How do you respond to that? Is it awkward? Is it like, as a civilian, what's a proper way for us to say thank you for your service? Because I do think there's a lot of people that genuinely appreciate it, and not like in a canned way, but just really respect what you've done. But in talking to you, it seemed like there was, maybe it put you in some awkward positions. Does anyone want to talk about that? Like, or be able to maybe elaborate a little bit about what I'm saying here?
Well, I know for me, like I spoke last night, I was my mother and my wife would say I was lucky enough to end up in a non-deployable unit, but I was there for 4 years. When someone hits me with a thank you for your service, I usually just say, oh, thank you. It was an honor. Thank you very much. But it does put me in a position where, like, I do kind of feel a little uncomfortable because having not deployed, having not gone anywhere, I do, part of me always will kind of feel like I did a little bit less than maybe I could have. So that's kind of where I go with it. But I always just say thank you, and it is appreciated just to hear, but it does kind of put some of us in like a bit of a weird spot.
Anybody else want to add to that? Or is it just is it not awkward?
To me, I think it's just a little bit awkward, and this is obviously my own personal preference. Thanking me for something we volunteered for, because we're all volunteers when it comes to military service. It's something that we chose either right out of high school or right out of college, and something that even if we did 4 years or 21 years, it was our pen to paper every time we re-enlisted. So no matter what we did during that time, we're a volunteer at that time, and it's just something each of us had the heart to do at that time.
Charlie, looked like you might have wanted to add to that.
Yeah, so typically my response is thank you. It was a pleasure. I had an opportunity to work with some great young men and women, right? So, and which is true. I had a blast. I wouldn't change anything else about it. Maybe stick around a few more years, but that's about it. But it can feel like a canned answer. And, I think I said last night, it's kind of like you pass someone and say, how you doing? So it's kind of become that way with thank you for your service. And it's typically, I feel like maybe they're not sure how to approach that. And I would offer that maybe a better way would be, thank you for your service. What did you do in the military, or what did you serve? That, what were some cool places you got to visit, right? So that kind of opens up a different conversation, and it doesn't feel as awkward, right? So now you're focusing on, yes, you served in the military. What kind of opportunities did that afford you? And then how did you enjoy it? So what was the impact?
That's great. I will say I have the magical ability to make any awkward situation far more awkward. So I'm probably the one that's like asking in a weird way and then putting you in a bad spot. So I'm actually learning a lot in that regard. Let's talk about communication in general, right? And when you're managing a vet and being able to provide feedback for that vet, one of the things that we talked about was giving that maybe constructive criticism to a veteran that's working for you. Any advice to anybody in terms of how you give that feedback? Like what's a good way to manage a vet? And one thing, even before I get to that, one thing I want to touch on, and I didn't talk about this when we were in our meeting before, but I say this a lot about technicians in general, and it to me is frustrating, and something that growing up as a young tech in a shop, that was kind of frustrating to me, was that we oftentimes would lump all technicians into the same boat, right? Like all of them were, like we'd say, yes, this is the demographic of technicians and they're all that way. And I'm like, no. There's different personalities. There's different, like, it's not everybody is this exact same thing. You have to learn that individual on a personal basis. Guessing that might be similar with a military background, right? You're not all like, we're putting vets in this kind of boat of their own and saying, well, you have to treat all of them exactly this way. Talk about the variances of personalities coming out of the military. I mean, it can't be that everybody has the same exact personality, and that we're talking about this and every vet is the same. Or are you? Maybe you guys are all the same. I just did this wrong.
No, I'm laughing because
Everyone's different, right?
everybody's different. Yeah.
So I'll use TC as an example. So if you look at TC, he's nice. He's organized. You can tell. Like, he just exudes executive, right?
Well, Charlie is my
me, on the
boss
other
on
hand,
here.
if I look at Mike when I go, okay, good to go, right? He's, I give him the knife hand. So everybody's a little different, and I think I spoke about this last night as well. So I spent about 2 years really working on, working on that jargon and translating that over. So that could be a challenge. But then just providing that structure, right? So, and not all veterans are the same. We're people first, right? So our experiences in the military, we experienced a lot of the same things, right? But then we experienced things differently. And I think Marc said, he spent some time in Okinawa. That was my favorite place. I spent 10 years collectively there, right? That was my second home. And it was because I loved it. I love the culture and everything about it, right? So, but you talk to another Marine, oh my God, I hated Okinawa, right? Because different personalities, right? So, you have to remember, so veterans are people first, but they do bring to the table some diverse experiences, right? Diverse in a manner of what they've physically done, what they've been exposed to, and some of the things they've seen in the world compared to the average 20 or 22-year-old.
Yeah, I was gonna touch on the diversity piece. Yeah, there's all walks of life that we've all probably had experiences with, all probably had experiences leading, and that to me is one of the most difficult things when you just don't know how to connect to that person that relies on you. That to me is something that you may not find somebody coming out of a 4-year school. So those things are extremely important as you look at not just hiring, but even as the leader over somebody who's a veteran and maybe you don't have that experience. Hey, they can take a lot, their experience across many different diverse groups, and the personalities. I'll go back to personalities because Charlie touched on something. It's not just the appearance. There's more in there once you peel back that first layer, and it's definitely something that I think that first bias when that person walks through the door is, all right, I see his sleeve, I see his tattoos, or I see that beard. For some companies that's instantly it's a no-go. For other companies it's almost welcomed. So I think that's important to think about as well.
Marc, did you have anything you wanted to add there? I think I saw you come off mute, and it looked like you maybe wanted to talk about it.
There's 5 of us here right now, and we're all different people. We have different backgrounds. We have, Charlie spending many years on Okinawa. I spent many years in Iraq and Afghanistan. It just, no matter what, we're acclimatized. We're easy to acclimatize to something different, and not even just weekly or monthly, but daily. We're so used to change and word changing so many times that it makes us better when it comes to being in a shop or even managing a shop, especially when it comes to customer service. Translating that customer's experience to a technician, and then the technician translating it back to a customer. We're just a little bit more keen on that aspect, and being able to one thing might lead to another, and the way the day changes or the way the market's changing, we're easy to adapt to it.
And
I think another thing that helps as well is bringing veterans in, or bringing employees in and making them feel like they're a part of the fold, like they're a part of the family. We kind of talked about it last night, where Charlie, he was a chief warrant officer when I was a baby Marine. I was brand new to the fleet. I couldn't have been more boot. And I think I'd been there about 2 weeks, and he came down to the bottom of our lot where I was working on a trailer, and he brought me some water, and he kind of just sat down and talked to me and asked me, where I was from, what I wanted out of the Marine Corps, and kind of how things were going for me, and then he set his expectation for me there. And that's something that I'm sure he's done with hundreds, if not thousands, of young Marines before, but it stuck with me really well. And it's something that kind of carried with me when I was management at the Ford dealer I was at, where, I take the new guy and, this Friday, you and I are going to go to lunch. Don't bring lunch Friday. We're going to go sit down and we're going to talk about how things are progressing for you and how you're feeling. And the same thing with my apprentices that I have now. It's nice to sit down and kind of see where they're at and bringing them in and making them feel like I'm paying attention and I'm there for them if they need me to be.
And that's not just a military thing, right? Like that is such a cool leadership thing to do from Charlie. And just, I think it speaks to character, and I think it speaks to the ability, and maybe that is something military driven, right? Where you just know how to deal with those situations and be able to talk to somebody. And, one of the things that we talked about last night was how you communicate, right? And how you like to give that constructive feedback. And one of those things was giving it direct, right? And getting to the point. Is that something that you guys are trained on, or in your military training that you learn how to learn that way, or that you like? Again, I don't want to put all military veterans into the same boat, but is that something, as you're going through your training and your upbringing, that's how you take feedback, or that's how you learn from a mistake?
From the day you step on the yellow footprints, you are getting criticized, being told what to do, how to do it, when to do it, how fast to do it. And you get into that mindset. So it becomes pretty much part of your daily life. Working on aircraft, you don't just sit in it, as a manager in the military, or a staff NCO, or a chief warrant officer. You're not constantly sitting behind a desk. You're walking amongst your Marines. You're walking that flight line, those aircraft, and getting, a feel for something. And always, and I bet everybody in this has heard this, but your head is constantly on a swivel. So, I mean, even today, I walk through my shop many times a day and sit, chat with technicians, take 5 minutes, walk around with them, get to know, hey, what's bothering you? What's good? What's bad? How can we improve? How can you improve? I think it just makes for a better shop and a better way of life when it comes to a shop. And not Fridays, I like to, splurge a little bit and, get lunch for my shop and have a sit down. Hey, what can we do to be better? Or, what don't you like, or what do you like? And it makes it makes not just, my military technicians, and my civilian technicians feel wanted, but they have no issues texting me or calling me or coming into my office and just getting 5 minutes off their chest, or, hey man, I never realized this on this car, that this is something I should be looking at. I just learned this and I thought it was totally awesome. I just think when it comes to, being a military veteran and managing a shop, always having that open door policy is something that we should all be doing as managers.
TC, did you want to add something there?
Oh man, I was gonna say, Charlie threw the knife hand out. I almost locked up when he did it, but no, I think, to Mark's point, it's instant. You get that instant feedback, and sometimes, I know myself, coming out of that environment and coming into a corporate setting, and you maybe don't get that constructive feedback. So again, that adds another level of complexity to how we learn, how we continue to grow. And, I think it was Michael, the competitiveness that's just buried inside of us, we need it. We thrive on that instant feedback, whether it's good or bad. Sometimes the bad feedback or the constructive feedback is the best for us. It's what helps us grow. So, I think the communication piece, it's always got to be, it's always well received when it's direct. So,
Duke, in terms of providing feedback, and what have you found best? And really, again, I think it circles back to the communication side, but if you're managing a vet, like what's the best way that you see about going about it and giving that kind of constructive criticism?
So, I always try to go by, clear expectations for predictable results. And I think you have to be crystal clear with not only vets, but all employees. And one of the things that I really have found helpful is building a career path. When you're in the military and you're in E1 or and you want to go to an E4, or you want to go into NCO school or TWO like Charlie, you know what it takes to get to that level. You know where your training has to be. You know where your physical fitness has to be. You know where all of your scores have to be, and then you have to be eligible and selected. You have to work for that. And I think for vets and other employees as well, a clear path for how do I get from a level C technician entry level to a level B, and what is that pay range? What training do I need? What tenure do I have to have? And have that where it's transparent for all employees, because in today's times, things change so fast, not only with the technology of the vehicles we're working on and the tooling and those requirements, but the skill set of certain employees. You may hire a B-level tech off the street who's worked at a fleet or another dealer, and in 5 years, he might still be a B-level tech. Well, conversely, you may hire a C-level vet that comes in, and a year from now, he's borderline A-level technician. You have to stay close to those and monitor those skill sets on a regular basis. So I think not only having a career path or that path laid out for you where you know how to get from point A to point B, regular reviews. An annual evaluation is great to have a sit down formal talk, but like Marc said, if you're not up and down that shop floor every day talking to those techs and monitoring their work and seeing how they're progressing, you're going to miss it, and someone else is going to capitalize on your loss, and you're going to lose a great employee. And it's funny, I have a lot of managers, and we talk a little bit about millennial training, right? And how do we reward those guys or gals? And I always tell them, in the past, hey, we sit down annually and we'll give a $2 an hour annual performance bump, right? Well, I think today a millennial wants that, they'd rather have 50 cents every quarter, and I think you would get more results. So it's just, I think you got to be faster and quicker and transparent with those guys.
So the last piece of this, of managing vets in a shop, and something that I thought was interesting in our conversations were, how do you help a vet get started, right? Say when they're coming out of the military, a lot of times maybe they're at a disadvantage in terms of tooling, or, maybe I think tooling might be the biggest thing, but any insight, and TC, I'll start with you here. Any, I guess, advice on how to help get a technician started in the industry?
Well, I think Duke said it. He's got years of experience doing it, and that's setting expectations, creating a structure, creating that path, right? What gets me from that C level to that A level? That's what we want to hear. That's what they want to hear. They want to know what it's going to take. They're going to come in and bust their tail no matter what. And that's what you get with that, because of the fact that, to get to go to a school, to get to do certain things, to stand in front of that board, you had to have stuck out in your group of peers. So I think setting clear expectations is hands down one of the best ways to get somebody prepared for growth, and then also just providing a structure to it. Autonomy is great in many situations. In some situations, it's preparing them for failure. So I think as you measure that, obviously folks coming out of the military have a little bit different experiences. You're able to really measure that matureness once you speak with them, once you have a little bit of time with them early in their employment. But I'll always go back to structure, a solid career path for them, and even giving them a little bit of guidance along the way.
Michael, any barriers that maybe you saw in your transition?
Well, like you said, the biggest barrier I probably had was going to be tools. Like, obviously, I wasn't loaded down with my 3 Snap-on boxes that are completely full right now. When I got out with a standard Craftsman set and a toolbox from Harbor Freight, and that's what I rolled into the Ferrari dealer. So from the other end, as opposed to like looking at it from the end where we're at, where we're kind of looking at hiring, recommending that guys go to school, even if it's for just a year, just a couple semesters. That student discount you get through Snap-on is at 56%. So being able to get your tools that way and being willing to work with someone who's in that program would be really helpful. And actually, to kind of touch back earlier, you were talking about ways to find veterans to get them to be technicians. Well, reaching out to your local community colleges, their Veterans Affairs offices for people that are in those programs is going to be a great way. You can offer them a part-time gig as a lube tech while they're in school. They get you 20 hours a week, and then once they're done with school, you have them as a full-blown ready to go tech, and by then they'll have all their tools built up and ready to go.
That's a great point. One question, and this will be my question, and then we'll get to maybe some of the others. But can you guys explain the GI Bill to me a little bit in terms of like what it is, what it pays for, that kind of stuff?
So I just stopped going to school. I kind of milked the rest of my GI Bill out after I got my 2 degrees. So I just stopped this semester. But
Good for you.
The way it works is you obviously apply for your benefits. They send you that you have a little letter saying that you have 36 months worth of benefits, which usually equals out to 4 years. They pay for your school as long as you're doing the appropriate paperwork. They pay for your school at a minimum of 6 credit hours for part-time, 12 credit hours for full-time, and then 6 credit hours full-time is over the summer. And they pay for your school, and they pay you your local BAH at an E5 with dependence rate. So for here in where I'm at now is Pueblo, Colorado, that was $1,400 a month. When I was living up in Denver, that was $2,200 a month. So that helped with, I could get just a light part-time job, still be in school, have bills covered, help take care of my wife. And that helped, again, subsidize like the obvious tool requirements that I was going to have, especially diving straight into a Ferrari program.
but even being, having the GI Bill and being able to dive, maybe not having so much pressure to go and get that full-time gig where, maybe that person going to a trade school who, money gets tight and maybe they don't go back for their second year and instead elect to work full-time. I think that's such a great thing to be able to utilize and be able to make sure you get your training and don't feel the pressure that I think a lot of students do. I think there's, from my understanding, the GI Bill is very, very beneficial to techs and really any vet coming out because it does allow you some flexibility there, right?
Yeah, and excuse me, I just did the thing, as Charlie pointed out in the chat. BAH stands for Basic Allowance for Housing.
What's funny is I almost asked myself, I'm like, wait a minute, you threw another acronym in there at me and almost threw me for a curveball there. So I appreciate the clarification. Let's maybe take some questions. I think we're getting close to our time here. But there was one question from Laura Guerrero that I really, really liked, which is, do you manage people differently based on how long they were in the service or on which branch they were in? And I thought that was kind of a fascinating question because it's kind of something I've wondered and never really had a clear answer to.
I have both a Marine Corps veteran and an Army veteran. I don't manage them any differently. The Marine Corps veteran, I do have higher expectations for, only because when he got out of the Marine Corps, he went to a formal technical college and majored in actual Nissan automotive. So when I kind of landed on him, he was the goldfish in my pond, because his father, amazing customer at my store, and my ears perked up when he said that his son, who just got out of the Marine Corps, was going to school to be a Nissan technician. So I looked at his father and said, well, I'll give him a pay plan, have him call me. But yeah, he landed on my doorstep as a B-level technician, so his expectations are a little bit higher. And I do have a training plan set forth to him to have him become an A-level tech by the end of the year.
Wow. And when you hear that, it's just kind of like he must have like a light shining behind him. And it's like, oh, like it's yes, we need more of those people. Duke, similar experience for you?
You know, we don't, or I don't manage differently. I think you kind of know based on their job description in the military, probably plays more role in that, because I mean, honestly, I think after basic training, if you're an aircraft mechanic in the Army or an aircraft mechanic in the Marines, I think your job skills are going to be the same. The training is similar for that period of time. So I don't think it requires any type of different management. I did want to make one quick comment in regard to kind of what Michael was saying about tooling. And Michael, I feel for you. When I got out of the Army, I had one of those Craftsman toolboxes, you know, you hand carry, and that's what I went to work with. And because they asked me, do you have tools? And I was like, yeah, I've got some tools. And when I got to the shop and I seen those big toolboxes, I realized I didn't have any tools. So, you know, the guys kind of rallied around and helped me out. But as a dealership or as a company, if you're going to be committed to hiring vets, you have to find a way. And there is a way. There's always a way. But you have to find a way to help those guys, whether you partner with even a local Napa store has quality tools that are lifetime guaranteed that you can buy at a reduced rate and put those in your shop. And if a guy stays with you for a year or 2 years, then you give them the tools in the toolbox. But you can build a good set to get a guy started or a gal started right out of the gate and be able to help them where they may not be able to come in right out of the gate going strong. So just some advice.
And that's great advice. I think that's really good. How do you appeal to a vet? As an employer, that's something that we talk about a lot with technicians in general, is that you need to sell yourself as your company to a technician, because there are more jobs than people to fill those jobs. As we're looking at veterans as a way to maybe fill the gap, how do you stand out if you're, you know, putting yourself back into when you're walking into civilian life? What is something that was intriguing about a business that you wanted to go work for?
So one comment on that, Jay, when I've gone to career fairs where there were military candidates, I've always taken a technician with me that was prior service. And that would be my advice. Get somebody who understands, who can speak recent and relevant experience.
I can say for me, it was always culture whenever I was looking at a job. There's obviously some places that were more desirable than others just for their specific reason, like being able to drive certain things. But when I was looking around, bouncing around, like looking at dealers, for me, it was always, hey, when I take a tour of the shop, does the manager take me on a tour of the shop during the interview? And when he does that, and I walk around and I see guys working next to each other, do they kind of chat? Do they talk to each other? Is the environment there good? And is it going to be nurturing for me as a tech? that's what I always kind of look for. I didn't want to see guys that were just buried in their work. Obviously, everybody gets busy, but you don't want to see guys that don't interact with each other at all, because that's not going to be a nurturing environment where I feel comfortable asking a question when I'm definitely going to run into the part where I have questions.
It's got to be fun, right? Like that's you spend a lot of time there, and if it's that's I think we've all walked into a shop where it's maybe a little bit you don't get the warm and fuzzies when you walk into it, right? And those shops, I mean, I don't know what it is, but you can tell as soon as you walk in that something's a little bit off, and I think regardless of a tech's background, they get that feeling too. I think that's really good. Melissa Klein had a really good question on, do you all feel that veterans are better communicators overall as employees than civilians? Different? Is there a different type of communication than civilians? Maybe that's a better way to phrase it.
I think right out of the service, it's different. Aside from that, no, you're still, there's still people. So the way you address them, and kind of going back to that direct feedback, so it's ingrained in us because, typically we could end up in life or death situations. So I don't want to beat around the bush. So typically, if they're right out of the service, straight and direct is going to be the most effective until they really make that transition, and then you can kind of communicate with them the same way you would any other employees. But again, same thing. Keeping in mind, it depends on the individual. Some individuals you can have a conversation with them short and sweet, not necessarily direct, and they'll get it and move on. And some you just have to be direct with.
All right, we're up on our time tonight, and I think because it's a night where we're focused on the military, ending on time is probably a good thing. As Sarah can attest to, this might be the first time that we've gotten close to stopping on time. So I want to thank you all for your time tonight. I know your time is extremely valuable. I can't tell you how much I appreciate all of you being on here, spreading your wealth of knowledge, and really helping somebody like myself be able to understand this in a little bit more detail. And there's a little bit of, I feel like an hour and a half probably isn't enough time to talk through all of the things we want to talk through, right? But truly appreciate all of you. I'm going to put you in an awkward position by saying thank you for your service. But I do really, really appreciate everything you do, the pride that you have in the service that you've given, and really just can't thank you all enough for being on.
It was a pleasure.
Absolute pleasure.
Anytime.
One last shout out that I've got to give is to Ophelia on our team at Find a Wrench. She served in the military, and we did our year-end reviews, and we call them discussions, but did our year-end discussion in December. And being a vet herself, she said, what would be great is if you guys would do a roundtable on veterans and being able to talk about it in a little bit more detail. So kudos to Ophelia. That was really, really a great thing that you brought it up, and a big reason as to why we're sitting here tonight. So thanks again to everybody. Thank you to all of the attendees out there. We appreciate the comments and the questions, and hope everybody just has a great night. And hopefully this isn't our last discussion on this, right? Let's keep this thing going and make sure that we're bringing awareness to this, and that we're really learning and understanding both the civilian side and the veteran side, the military side, and hopefully keep this thing moving forward. So thank you all. Have a great night.